Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 142, and for this episode, I'm going to be talking about an artist that I featured in one of my previous episodes, which is Larry Heard. In my previous episode, I fixated on only Larry Heard's remixes, but in this episode, I'm going to talk about some of his original productions. His original productions go all the way back to 1985. I think it was one of his first tracks. So Larry Heard is a Chicago-based producer that is considered to be really one of the original kingpins of the house music scene. He was featured in a couple of different groups, I think, that he participated in, and has amassed a really, really big catalog over the years. And one of the things that I love about Larry Heard is just how absurdly consistent he is with his productions. It's like he may have taken a few years, and some people might even disagree with this, to really refine his sound, but like once he settled into his sound, he more or less stayed with his theme, like similar to how an old Joe Claussell record kind of sounds recognizable relative to a brand new Claussell record. Larry Heard has the same thing going on, and I think a lot of accomplished producers have that trait of they discover their sound, they refine it, and they have something that works. It's their particular flavor, and they just continue putting out different variations of it through the years. And I mean, some of these tracks that I'm going to review with you here, Larry never runs out of ideas. I mean, there's consistent themes. If you listen to his tracks across time, the melodies and the pianos that he uses are recognizable. I've listened to enough of his records that I can hear some of the percussions. Like he likes to use ticky ticky ticka ticka percussions in his tracks. It's like that I can tell that that's a Larry Heard percussion right there. But he also always finds a way to pull in some other weird, cool, clever element to really set his tracks off. So it'll be very easy for me to talk about these records. Sometimes I pull a batch of records and it's like it's harder for me to formulate thoughts or concepts around them, but not here. So I have 5 original Larry Heard tracks for you today, and I originally was gonna do like a massive episode, and I had 10 of them picked out. But every time I do an episode with 9, 10 tracks, it just gets to be too much. Like my mouth gets dry by the end because I'm talking for too long. So I'm just gonna try to keep this nice and short and tight, and then I'll come back and do another 5, when I'm in the mood for it. And speaking of in the mood, it's just on the cusp of getting into springtime here. So what a great time to be playing some straight up classic traditional house records. First, and I'm going to go chronologically for this episode, is this Loosefingers EP. I think this is the reissue. The original Loosefingers, this is, by the way, this is Glancing at the Moon. It's a 3-track. It came out in 2003. The original has a colored logo, so I must have got a reissue. I'm pretty sure I got this from Juno maybe like a year or 2 ago. I think they did a reissue, but this was actually a recommendation of my good friend Tim. Tim is also known as, on Discogs, his old Discogs username used to be Tim, capital Tim. Then he changed his name to Errors in Space, and he's also currently the label owner, curator for Rediscovery Records. So he's basically reissuing old ambient records from the early 90s that he really likes. But anyways, he recommended Lamentation here for me, I think as a result of the Larry Heard remix episode that I put out like a year and a half ago. I think he messaged me or commented about Lamentation, and I checked it out, and I really love this. And when I was talking about Larry Heard always finding something clever or interesting to add into his tracks to spice up the basic formula, I mean, listen to the bass stabs, the bass line, if you want to call it that, in Lamentation. It has this very round, plasticky sound to it. I can't even. Sometimes a producer will generate a sound, and I can't. Not only can I not fathom how they created it in the studio, but I also lose the words or the ability to even describe it. And the bass line in Lamentation is a great example of that. Keep in mind that this was produced in 2003, And yet the sound of that punchy, stabby bass line, I can't think of another track that has that in it. So whatever he did, it was pretty clever there. And that is sort of juxtaposed with this kind of childlike kazoo playful element that just kind of rides and floats over top of the entire track. If you listen to this without a subwoofer, if you just listen to it, you'll mainly get the melody if you're listening to it maybe on a laptop or earbuds. But listen to how deep like how deep the bass line digs. It's just, like I said, very like round and almost like the bass line equivalent of somebody dribbling a basketball. Like I don't know what else to say about it except for that it really rocks. Now, moving up to 2006, I'm going to feature I'm going to say this is Larry Heard's biggest record ever. In terms of sales and possibly overall popularity, the number of times that it was featured in mixes and such, this is the one that everybody knows, and maybe you don't know it if you're not like super into house music, but you should. This is Larry Heard, or Mr. White featuring Larry Heard, or no, I'm sorry, Larry Heard presents Mr. White, Sun Can't Compare. This came out in 2006. There are many different represses of it because people just keep buying it, and they're buying it because it's so good. So for me to like a track like this, considering that the foundational elements are like typical acid and drum machines, where that type of house I would normally like really shy away from, or like I really only have like a handful of like true like drum machine oriented house in my collection, because it's kind of like I was clubbing like too late for that. I wasn't clubbing in the early 90s or late 80s to really have an appreciation for what those sounds can do on a big system. But the vocal, I think, is what makes it kind of like more palatable and in my realm. And the vocal's interesting because I didn't really realize this about the track until I tried to DJ it with other tracks. You really have to be careful what you play Sun Can't Compare into. The girl's vocal is like kind of slightly off key, like it's a little bit off key, and it for that reason I think it makes it like a little bit. Yeah, like I said, you have to harmonically mix it, and because of that, you have to be careful what you put into it. Like you could really easily create a key clash with that vocal. But the Mr. White aspect of this, I'd really like to know what Mr. White's contribution was to the record. It's definitely more drum machine oriented than typical Larry Heard records, but Larry Heard also obviously knows his way around drum machines since he's been producing since the 80s. But Mr. White is Chad White, and Chad White has his own, pretty robust catalog of house music. So if anybody has any expertise on what Chad's contribution to this record was, like which elements are coming from which person, I would love to hear you nerd out in the comments and talk about that. But really nice vocal. I absolutely love it. And there was one aspect of it. I heard that vocal actually layered by Guy Gerber in his, I think it was either a Resident Advisor or Fabric mix with another track, and oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. But if I can remember the name of it, I'll put the text down in the bottom there. But Really, really great classic vocal. Really one of the best house vocals of all time.
You are my life. The sun can't compare. The sun can't compare to your life. To your life. You are my dream. Dream. The moon can't compare. The moon can't compare to your beam. To your beams. Open up. And see that everything is how it ought to be. Day breaks, feel so free. I am better every moment. Every time you are close to me.
Now, if I'm being honest, my original exposure to Larry Heard's music, I don't think I really stepped into his realm until about the year 2010. And that might have been, I think it might have been with the Alpha record that's over my shoulder there with the tower in the background. I think that might have been my first discovery or find with him, and that got me searching through, you know, Juno and Discogs to see what else he had. And of course, there's reviews all over the place. So trying to understand Larry Heard's catalog in a short period of time is a monumental task. But I think maybe one of the second or third records that I ever picked up from Larry Heard's catalog is this. It's basically a various artists EP. And you can see if it has Moody Man. I might have even discovered it as a side effect of searching for Moody Man. And Larry Heard, in my opinion, dominates this. He has the entire A side with his wonderful track. I mean, really one of the best he's ever made, called Winter Flower. Winter Flower is like a 9-minute, like stone cold Larry Heard classic. It has a feature to the melody that I've seen other producers use. It's a very simple theme, but they start with a note, they take it up a notch, they go above that, and then they go above that. So you get 3 steps up, and then it resets back down. 3 steps up, resets back down. And it basically creates the feeling of an ever gentle rise, kind of like Larry Heard's version of a shepherd's tone. I mean, it's not a secret to build a track that way or to structure a melody that way. Like I said, other producers have done it. I remember Guy Barato did it in his track "A Beautiful Life," which came out in 2007. That's the first one that kind of pops into my mind. But you'll hear other progressive house and progressive natured music will feature that. Larry did it with his signature piano, the sad piano. And the percussion in Winter Flower is just absolutely hypnotic. It's great in headphones. I never got to hear this on a system, but it really dominates. And I particularly remember a moment with this record. It was around the same time that I had bought Baby Ford's Westway, which is really one of Baby Ford's biggest tracks ever. I'll give you a picture of Westway. Westway and Winter Flower are in the same key, or very, very close to the same key, and I accidentally stumbled into playing them together, and my head exploded. Like I couldn't believe how good that mix, that blend sounded. There aren't that many records in my entire catalog where I can say that it's like it has something else that it almost has to be played next to, but this is a great example of that. And I actually, in my most recent mix, the most recent Mark Anthony video vinyl that I did, I started out with Baby Ford Westway and I went into Winter Flower just to kind of like showcase that harmonic mix, and it turned out great. So little like secret weapon trick there. If you're gonna buy Winter Flower, which by the way is still in stock on Juno. Every time I search for Larry Heard records on Juno, Winter Flower is in stock. So it's just like perennially, oh my gosh, perennially in stock, never goes away, and it's just sitting there for $12.50. So if you feel compelled after this sample, just go and grab it. I really think you're gonna feel like it was a good purchase. And now moving up to 2016, this is one of the best Larry Heard records out of his entire catalog. And I think if you took a survey or a vote, it would certainly land in the top 3 of all time. Like I said, came out in 2016, and I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember playing it for the first time. This is Mr. Fingers' Outer Acid EP. And this, you talk about selling copies, this is probably very close, if not second place to in total sales to the Sun Can't Compare that I mentioned before. Anybody that loves pure house music basically has to acknowledge this as one of the best house records of all time. I mean, there's no gimmicks in here. This is nothing but pure timeless music from front to back. My pick on here, which is a tough pick, is Quasars. When I listen to Quasars, it's like, man, which element could I talk about? The first thing that stands out to me is the subdued kick drum. I love when producers have a kick that has the thud, but none of the high end is on it, right? So you can have kicks that have like the, you know, like if you're in a production software, you can sit there and play with the high end of the kick and change the shape of the wave and filter out certain frequencies. You know, so some genres, you know, especially like techno, they'll have like a high-end kind of whack on top of the kick to, I don't know, maybe give it just like a little bit more of a distinction. But I like the subdued kicks better, where it's just all low end and you don't really get the full premise of it until you get to hear it on a system, either a really nice home system or a club system, and you're like, oh, I did not know that this track had that kind of capability. But Quasars has that, and the melody in it, it's funny that the track's called Quasars. First of all, the vocal that's saying, what's going on, Quasars, to me, that sounds like Carl Sagan's voice. I was trying to do some Google searching to see if I could figure out where that sample was taken from. I couldn't find anything. I tried searching Carl Sagan and Quasars to see if he had done maybe a Cosmos episode on it, but I wasn't able to dig anything up. But there's something about the way that that voice says that. Carl Sagan kind of had a weird little eccentric way of saying some of his words. He was very like specific when he pronounced a word. So I think that might be Carl's voice. If anybody out there knows, please comment down below. I would love to hear what that sample came from. And playing into the space theme, there's also a very jumpy, jittery melody that kind of sounds like the melodic Larry Heard equivalent of Morse code. It's really like kind of like glitchy and tappy and kind of gated in a very futuristic outer space and kind of, I don't know, sci-fi. It has like a very sci-fi element or tinge to it. So all of these elements come together, and that's why I said, I mean, this is like pure creativity. Everything on this EP is like its own special flavor of Larry Heard just hitting his full stride. And for my last pick of this episode, track number 5, I'm going to feature Larry's most recent album under his Mr. Fingers alias. This came out, I think, in late summer of 2022. Really cool cover art. It kind of has this like watery, flowery look to it. I can't even really tell what it is, but the colors are just really nice. Like to get yellow, green, and red to all sit together, I think whoever designed this did a really great job. And this is just another example of Larry Heard being able to just constantly knock it out of the park. I mean, his Cerebral Hemispheres album was flawless. That's a triple pack. And you would think after that, maybe he's going to drop the ball and have a weak release, but he didn't. This is just more springtime, summertime, sunny day music. I will say though, there are a couple of tracks on here that aren't sunny day, and the one that stands out the most to me as kind of like having a dark, clubby edge to it is the one I'm going to feature for you today. It is Marrakesh on the D1. And the sample that I'm going to give you here is the intro to Marrakesh. A lot of times I'll grab a track, when I sample it, somewhere in the midsection of the track so that you get the most elements. In this case, I specifically sampled the record early because I am in love with the intro loop. From the very beginning, if you just listen to that dub-tinged loop, before it ever gets to the melody, it's just hitting so hard and rocking. I made a comment when I first listened to Marrakesh. I commented on Discogs that I would love for Larry to see that comment and basically create an extended, like more dark version of Marrakesh based on that loop. Like if he did a 12-13 minute version of that took up one side of like kind of like a remix or an extended version vinyl, I would absolutely love it. Not the fault the melodies that do come in to Marrakesh at the end, because they really do fit the track, but I would love to just have it not get melodic and somehow he adds like another dark tinge to it. I think it would really set it off. But let me know what you guys think of Marrakesh. All right, that's all for my Larry Heard Original Classics Part 1. There might be a Part 2, and if Larry keeps producing, maybe there'll be a Part 3 way down the line. But that's all for now. Larry, thank you for the tunes. And again, feel free to comment if any of these tunes remind you of other Larry records that you like. And also stay tuned for Part 2 in the future. Thank you, and take care. Bye.
Another day.